Tony Stark, but he's an internet sensation by jophieso. Work 2. Tony Stark wanting to live, but it's 10 minutes long. Almost every day Peter was at the tower, he had a new video to show Tony. Tony persevered and watched these videos, despite them being the same clips over and over, for Peter's sake. Peter thought the videos were hilarious, and they made the kid smile, so who was Tony to deny him that? The titles only got more elaborate as time went on. Videos taken moments before Tony Stark calls the funeral home. Tony Stark, except he constantly looks like he stubbed his toe. Death, but Tony Stark. However, Tony did spend a lot of time in the tower, around these people. As much as he acted like he'd be going to the laundry room for his next meal, he loved them more than he'd care to admit. When the internet had just about run its course with Tony's death wishes, they had to find something else from the surveillance leak to entertain them. Unexpectedly, an entirely new genre of compilations became popular. Clips of Tony spending quality time with his Avengers family, short moments where he couldn't have looked happier to be where he was, spread like wildfire. Soon enough, Tony loving his family was the focus of the newest wave of Tony Stark-related content. It was pretty much the exact opposite of the previous trend. And, once again, Justin Hammer was furious. Not only were Tony and the Avengers proven to be delightfully relatable and human, but now there was evidence that Tony Stark was just a big teddy bear of a guy who wanted the best for everyone. Disgusting. Tony Stark loving his team for 10 minutes. Tony Stark physically restraining himself from hugging his teammates. Tony Stark being the man of everyone's dreams. And again, Peter absolutely adored the videos. Though this time around, he wasn't crying laughing. He was simply in awe of how kind-hearted his mentor really was when you took a moment to think about it. Tony Stark, but he's just the smiley face emoji. What the public learned this time around was that Tony loved his family. A lot. The beginning of this particular clip simply showed two men hunched over something on a table, Bruce and Tony. While Tony was a mechanic, Bruce worked with living things. They didn't often share labs, but today was the exception. Today, there was no real objective, no groundbreaking science going on. Today, they were making volcanoes. It seemed a little elementary for two of the smartest minds in the world, yes, but it was a break from all the revolutionary work they'd have to do later. Both of the men straightened up, and another camera angle revealed the rather impressive volcano that Bruce and Tony had been able to create. Of course, with these two men, nothing scientific could truly be elementary. "You ready for this, Brucey Bear?" Bruce rolled his eyes fondly. "Go for it, shellhead." With a click of a button, the volcano was spewing make-believe lava, and Tony and Bruce were high-fiving and celebrating like college students at a frat party. It was simple, but it still managed to draw childlike wonder from the men. The video then cut to the clean-up process, Tony and Bruce wiping fake lava from various surfaces. Tony paused his efforts for a moment, looking thoughtfully at his friend who was wiping lava off a cabinet. "Bruce, I'm really glad you're here. It might sound stupid, but I don't know, it's the little things, I guess. I'm just thankful for you and our experiments is all." Bruce smiled, but kept at his cleaning. "I'm glad I'm here too, Tony. You've given me a home, a place where I'm safe." Tony grinned, though it wasn't actually his particularly stubborn splotch of lava, even if he'd never admit it. Tony Stark being a hug dealer. Bucky sat at one of the many metal tables in Tony's lab, shirt off so Tony could work on the arm. Bucky was fidgeting, and it was quite obvious. He shifted nervously on the table, acting as if Tony hadn't done this many times before. Luckily, Tony noticed the abnormal behaviour. He understood. Everyone had their bad days, and Bucky's were usually worse than most. "You okay, Robocop?" Concern laced Tony's face as he continued to work diligently on the metal limb. Bucky shrugged, drumming his flesh fingers against the tabletop nervously. Bad nightmare. Can't get it out of my head. Bodies, bodies, and more bodies. The former assassin brought his hand up to his mouth and bit at his nails nervously. Well, we can't have that now, can we? Arm's all done, by the way. Tony set down his tools and closed up the last panel on Bucky's arm. Flex, Tony instructed, and the metal arm recalibrated itself, panels shifting into place. I know Steve's out on a mission and he usually helps you, right? What can I do? Bucky dropped his hand from his mouth and pointed his eyes at the ground. It's stupid, I'll be fine. Tony rolled his eyes. Whatever it isn't stupid. I want to help you out, Bucky. Still, Bucky was hesitant, but he shrugged eventually, having given up. Steve, usually, he holds me. I don't know. It makes me feel better. Something Hydra never would have done, you know? Tony smiled, finally getting an answer he deemed acceptable. Alright, cool. Is it okay if I hug you? Bucky nodded and Tony wrapped his arms around the larger man. Bucky visibly relaxed and Tony noticed. His lips turned up into a smile, glad he could help a friend out. Iron Dad and his spider son. Tony was working on the couch in his penthouse when Friday notified him that Peter was on his way up. Tony hadn't been expecting Peter today, but the kid was always welcome. He quickly arrived at a stopping point on his work and closed the programme, getting ready to greet Peter. What he had not been prepared for, though, was Peter yelling as soon as he exited the elevator. Mr. Stark, where are you? Quickly, Tony got worried. Why would the kid be yelling? He sprung up from the couch, yelling, In the living room! Peter bolted into the living room, holding a piece of paper in his hands. Out of breath, he said, Mr. Stark, it's MIT! I got into MIT! Tony's eyes went wide, and he grabbed the paper from Peter. He scanned it quickly and threw it to the side at the same speed, immediately pulling Peter into a bone-crushing hug. I'm so proud of you, kid. So proud. I knew you could do it. Tony and Peter both had matching grins, wider than anyone thought humanly possible. After a beat of silence, Peter threw his arms up and cheered. I'm going to MIT! Tony Stark videos that will make you feel again. Pepper, honey, come back to bed, Tony whined. In a minute, dear, she replied, emerging from her bathroom soon after, hiding a thin object behind her back. Tony noticed the arm tucked behind her back and rose an eyebrow curiously. What have you got there, Pep? Pepper smiled mischievously and sat down on the bed. Close your eyes. Tony quirked an eyebrow at his fiancée, but complied, even sticking out his hands without being prompted to. Pepper set the object she'd been hiding in his hand. A pregnancy test. Open them. Tony opened his eyes and looked down at the object in his hands quickly. He took a moment to register just what he was seeing, before jumping from the bed, positive pregnancy test still in his grasp. Is this real? You're pregnant? Pepper nodded, a smile spreading across her face. Tony had one to match, and he leapt back onto the bed, wrapping his arms around her as tightly as possible. With happy tears in his eyes, he gave Pepper a deep kiss before leaning down to her stomach. He placed his hands there gently. We're going to be parents. I'm going to be a dad. The world's softest heroes. V2. It was movie night, the first movie night in a very long time that the entire Avengers family was at. Tony was at the centre of it all, Pepper curled into his side. Everyone was spread amongst the furniture, bowls of popcorn making their way around the room. Tony seemed to be paying attention to anything but the movie. You good, love? Pepper whispered. Tony looked at her, and then back around the room. Steve and Bucky were squished into a love seat not built for two super soldiers. Natasha sat in an armchair beside them, Clint draped over her lap. Sam, Rhodey and Peter were bickering over who got the last handful of popcorn, while Wanda played with Thor's long hair. Beside Thor was Bruce, looking very at peace with himself for once. Everyone was there, safe and accounted for. And beside Tony was his amazing fiancée, who was carrying his baby. Tony looked back at Pepper. "Yeah, I'm fine. I'm perfect right now." Pepper smiled and rested her head against him, and he let warmth flow through him willingly. He was here with his magnificent, very non-traditional family surrounding him. That was all he needed. Thanks so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed. Have a lovely rest of your day.